In 2015, a team led by paleoanthropologist Lee Berger announced the discovery of Homo naledi, a previously unknown human relative, deep inside a cave system in South Africa called the Rising Star Cave. What they found in a chamber called the Dinaledi Chamber was not a single skeleton. It was the remains of at least 15 individuals, and the chamber was extraordinarily difficult to reach. The only known entrance was a passage called the chute, a vertical drop of 12 meters followed by a horizontal crawl through a gap just 25 centimeters wide. In places, a human adult today can barely fit through it. Those bodies did not fall in by accident. They were brought there. In 2023, Berger's team published further analysis suggesting that Homo naledi had been intentionally placing their dead in this chamber for a significant period of time. The dating was controversial. Some estimates put the age at 250,000 to 300,000 years. If accurate, that makes the Dinaledi Chamber the oldest known mortuary site on Earth, and Homo naledi had a brain roughly a third the size of yours. This is the part that stops researchers. The assumption had always been that intentional burial required a certain level of cognitive complexity, a brain large enough to model the concept of death, to understand that the person who is there is no longer there, to feel that something is owed to the body, to organize a group around a shared response. We assumed that behavior was reserved for species with brains like ours. Homo naledi suggests we were wrong about when that capacity appeared, and possibly wrong about what kind of brain produces it. But Homo naledi is not the only challenge to the standard timeline. In northern Israel, at a site called Qafzeh Cave, archaeologists found burials of anatomically modern humans dated to around 90,000 years ago. Several of the graves contained grave goods. A child was buried with the antlers of a large deer placed across its body. The antlers were too large to have fallen there. They were placed. Someone made a decision about what this child should have with them. At Sungir, a site in Russia dated to around 34,000 years ago, 2 children were found buried head-to-head in a single grave. They were covered in thousands of mammoth ivory beads. Thousands. Researchers calculated that producing that many beads, carved individually from mammoth ivory, would have taken a single person roughly 10,000 hours. That is more than 4 years of full-time work. For a grave. The community that buried those children did not produce those beads for practical reasons. They were not feeding anyone. They were not building shelter. They were not solving a survival problem. They were spending an enormous, almost incomprehensible quantity of collective effort on people who could no longer benefit from any of it. That is not instinct. That is culture. And it is culture doing something that no purely survival-focused account of human behavior can explain. Something in that community felt that the dead deserved that labor, not strategically, not because it would help anyone living, because it was owed. The question that drives the researchers who study these sites is not what the people believed. It is what the act of burial did to the people who performed it. Paul Pettitt, an archaeologist at Durham University, makes an argument that shifts the entire frame. Burial is not primarily about the dead. It is about the living, specifically about what happens to a social group when it has to collectively confront the fact that one of its members is gone. Death is the most disruptive event a small social group can face. A person who was part of the web of relationships, obligations, knowledge, and memory that holds the group together is suddenly absent. That absence is not just emotional. It is structural. The group has to find a way to acknowledge it, process it together, and continue. Burial is how you do that. Burial is how you do that together. The act of gathering around a body and doing something intentional with it, placing it, marking it, covering it, staying with it long enough to perform a ritual, forces the group into a shared experience of loss. Everyone present is acknowledging the same fact at the same time. That is not a small thing in a world where social cohesion is the difference between survival and extinction, but there is something else happening in that act that goes deeper than social management. To bury someone deliberately, you have to understand that they are not coming back. That seems obvious. But cognitively, it is not. It requires what psychologists call theory of mind applied to a permanent state. You have to model the fact that this person, who had a mind, who had intentions and knowledge and a perspective on the world, no longer has any of those things, that their experience has ended, and that yours has not. That, Awareness, the awareness of your own mortality reflected in another person's death, is one of the most cognitively demanding things a mind can do. Research in evolutionary psychology suggests the awareness of death is so destabilizing to the human psyche that virtually every cultural product humans have ever made, the art, the religion, the social hierarchies, the drive for legacy and meaning, is in some way a response to it. A way of managing the knowledge that you will die. Your brain does not handle that knowledge easily. It never has. The response to it is not acceptance. It is construction. You build things. You create things. You contribute to things that will outlast you. You attach yourself to groups and causes and ideas that feel larger than a single life. All of it, every form of that reaching, starts from the same awareness. Burial may be where that awareness was first forced into the open. Not as theology, not as comfort, as a cognitive act that forced a group of early humans to sit with the hardest knowledge their minds had ever processed, and in sitting with it together to begin building the structures of meaning that would eventually become language, religion, art, and everything else that makes human culture what it is. The oldest graves are also, in a sense, the oldest evidence of imagination. To bury someone with grave goods, to place antlers across a child's body, or spend 10,000 hours making beads for a grave requires you to imagine a future for the dead. A journey, a destination, a state of existence that you cannot see and cannot verify. That act of imagining, that reach beyond the observable into the possible, is the same cognitive move that produces every other form of human creativity. The cave paintings at Lascaux, the first stories told around a fire, the first time someone looked at the night sky and asked what was up there. Every myth, every poem, every prayer, all of it draws on the same cognitive move. The capacity to hold in your mind something that does not exist in front of you and to treat it as real enough to act on. Burial may not have been a product of that capacity. It may have been one of the first places that capacity was practiced. The first exercise, the first time a human mind was forced, by circumstances too real to avoid, to imagine what it could not see. And having done it once, having built that mental muscle by sitting with the hardest fact there is, it never stopped. We do not know exactly when the first human ancestor looked at a dead body and felt that something was owed. We do not know what they thought, what they felt, whether they had any concept that approached what you would call belief. What we know is what they did. They went to the effort. They made the gesture. They responded to death with intention rather than indifference. And in doing so, they crossed a line that no other species has ever crossed. Not because they had answers, because they had the need to respond. That need is still in you. You feel it at funerals. You feel it when you visit a grave or keep an object that belonged to someone gone. You feel it in the strange pull to mark the place where something ended. To say, with some action however small, that this person was here, that it mattered, that the absence is real and deserves acknowledgement. That pull is not modern. It is not cultural in the sense of being learned. It runs deeper than any specific belief system. It is the oldest thing your species does. And it started, as best we can tell, in a cave in South Africa, in a chamber barely wide enough to crawl through, where someone carried the dead so far into the dark that they must have believed or felt or sensed that it meant something. They were right. It did. It still does. That small shift in how you see yourself is why this channel exists. Every week I follow one human instinct back to where it began. Subscribe so the next one reaches you. Leave a like so it reaches someone else. And if you want to keep pulling this thread, the next one is on screen now.